Now, I hope I have the best focus I can. I'm actually manually focusing these cameras, and the depth of field for these kinds of shots is very, very shallow. So I hope this is in reasonable focus. I'll cry if it's not, but it's certainly, some part of it probably is. So anyway, so this is the platform, and there's nothing special to talk about it per se. It's just a wooden platform. I used a couple, I think these were big spears that I hacked apart to make the uprights, filled in. No, I think this is from Goblin Town because I recognize that kind of a fill mark. Then I tied it with my copper wire, as I've done before, to emulate rope, and I thought that came out pretty well. Put in the hooks for them, and then came the issue of what to put on it. And as I said earlier, I need it to be heavy, as heavy as I can. In fact, this is actually pulling down on the uprights. It's bending them slightly, and I wanted it to be even heavier actually, and they can take more weight. But at some point, I'm running the risk of making it look implausible that this is being lifted up. There are only snotlings running the winches, and although I have some ideas on that, I'll show you that in a second. But that meant that I had to basically find a way to make what's on here as heavy as possible. So, aside from the actual white metal bits, the two snotlings, and then over here, this is a lamb from an old giant kit. This was given to me, and oh, so great. What a fun piece, and it's on a little hook, so I figured we'll just hang it off the side, and it's latched on there on the way up. Actually, fallen inside here, I just realized if I had mounted this sideways, then I'd have the nice white back against this. I don't know. Anyway, I guess when it rocks, I was like, well, at least it won't hit the sides. But so, and then I was going to put this little bag on here, but that in a bunch of plastic is nothing. So what I did is I filled every one of the objects you see with solder. I actually tried to fill them with other things. First thing I tried was white metal. I melted down a miniature and dribbled it in, and that was not working well. The melting of the miniature was very, very hard to control. I'm not going to take all these off here. I'll show you just one more or two more. Right? So this skull is filled with solder. And the miniature melting really irregularly. It's not a unified ingot or something like that. That was a nightmare. So I tried to pack them with copper foil, and fill, like the insides of the little barrel and just sort of pack it in as I folded it and layered it in. That does not work. And so what I ended up doing was I finally thought, oh, wait a minute, I've got solder. And so I filled them with solder and then sanded them, ground them, I should say, with my Dremel back to smooth. Now, with all of this stuff on here, all of them filled, even the cow is filled. Inside the cow, it is chock full of solder. This, I know, I'm nuts, but this is the only way I could make it heavy. With all of this on here, it's about 80 grams. And I think after about 60 grams or so, I'm not gaining much in the way of tension on the ropes, but I was like, why not just go a little more? It's unfortunate that I couldn't use lead. Just as a comparison, science boy here, white metal has a density of, wait a minute, I wrote it down here somewhere. Where is that? Of about 7.3 grams per cubic centimeter. That's those guys. Solder is a little bit denser. It comes in at about 8 ballpark. It depends on the solder. This is lead-free solder, unfortunately. And then you have lead, and lead is 11 grams per cubic centimeter. So lead would be 30% heavier than the solder that I use. So this would probably weigh like 100 grams instead of 80. I don't know if that's going to make a big difference, but it would have made me feel better. And so anyway, I don't have lead. I couldn't melt it. So anyway, Here's a tip just before we leave this, because we are done with this section. You may say, "How? You can't just pour solder into that. It'll just melt like plastic." It will melt it, and I melted one doing this. But the trick is to not add all of the solder at once. If you let a small drop go in, it's not hot enough, doesn't have enough mass to melt the barrel. Then you let it cool. Then you put the second drop in. Once you've done that a couple times, the solder inside, when it's cool, acts as a heat sink for the next drop. So it actually gets easier and easier to fill it the more and more it gets filled. But it's the very initial pours that you have to be really careful. Pours. Holding it with a torch and going drip. Oh, okay. And aiming to make sure you get it in the hollowed out space rather than on the side, which would mess it up. That's actually built into this barrel, but there were a few that received some deformities during the process. Anyway, so that is the strategy I used to create the platform and to have it work with the luff tackle and try to make it believable. So this series of pieces here that you see before you was the most time-consuming thing I have worked on to date, especially when you consider the winches, and I'll show you those now. All right, and so who's going to power that platform and elevator system? Well, it's going to be these guys. Basically, I had some great suggestions. Somebody mentioned like a wheel that the snotlings would walk in, like a hamster wheel to wind up the rope, and a lot of great ideas. But believe it or not, this was the simplest one I could come up with. So this is what I decided to go with. It was what I envisioned originally, and I like the way it came out. So first, a few things about how it went together here. So these logs are sculpted in the same way as I did the idol. I sculpted them on an axle. This does not actually turn, but you know me, I wanted it to turn if it could. So it is on an axle, and then I've used shields pressed together to make the wheels at the ends to put the handles into. I had some questions about how to do this. At first I was just going to bend the metal to provide the handle coming out of the axis. That looked really bad, very fake, not right at all. So then I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, well, normally, right, it'd be on a wheel. So I cut that apart and stuck that in there. I'm using spears for the uprights, and the spears ended up a little bit surprising to me. I needed something that could hold this down, right? So by making the X and then tying, roping it off above and below, right, that becomes the pinch point that keeps the log from flying up into the air as the platform comes crashing down. And I thought I'd have the spears believably feel like they were buried in the ground, and that is what anchors the whole thing. So these were originally full-size spears, and I thought, well, I'll just cut them down as I need to once I get it all together. And I forgot, I have to size it to these guys. So I had to cut them down a lot, and it feels a little out of proportion. I don't know, that's probably me being overly picky, shock, but I felt like they seem really big for these little guys in the system. I think it works, but it wasn't the way I had envisioned it when I started out this process. So that's half of the job. The other half of the job was getting these guys to hold the rods. The normal go-to that I've done in the past, especially if you're working with plastic, right, is just cut a section off of the rod and then glue it in between their hands and cut another section off and glue it over here. That's not great. And it's very hard to make sure that the hands are, that the rod is perfectly lined up. And the snotlings have all sorts of positions that aren't exactly right for holding the rod. So what I ended up doing is I ended up drilling out with the smallest bit on my Dremel. God, I love my Dremel. And I literally drilled out the hole in their hand, exactly the size of the rod, so that the rod couldn't slide right through. So I had to adjust their hands ever so much to get them to fit. To me, it's the best way to get this effect. And I think it came out really well, and that's, you know, that's my opinion. I think it looks great. The snotlings look very believable in holding on to those bars, and that was my really big goal. Now, in addition to them cranking on the wheel, I want to have a snotling pulling rope off of the wheel. So there'll be two winds, right? There's going to be this big wind that has the rope that goes to one side of the platform, right? One of the luff tackles. And then there'll be a smaller rope wind that one of these guys is going to be pulling it off to help turn the winch and wrap the other rope around it. So this is another example of you know, drilling that guy's hands out to get that rope to fit in there. And I think I might I can't believe I'm saying this, I think I might add one more to the pulling of each rope. So let's see here, wait a minute, I'll put this guy over here, right? So this guy, I was able to cut his weapon off and rearrange his hands. Wait a minute, I'm just gonna look in the camera, hold on. Well, it's gonna be good enough. So he was holding, I forget what, some kind of weapon, and so drilled that out carefully, leaving his hands there, and then bent this arm up, and now a rope will lay right against it so he can pull the second rope off. I don't know though. You know what? I might add one more so there were like two snotlings are pulling at the same time, and this snotling gives you an idea of what I'm working with here. This would not have been my first choice, which is why he still has his, I don't know what it is, like a mushroom ball or something here. But this is the kind of modification that I've been doing. So if I want to add this guy to the rope, which I may, I have to Dremel out all of that material in there, carefully leaving, you know, the hand, and then I'll have to pull the hands together a little bit apart and then wrap the fingers around the rope. That's doable. I mean, I made somewhat similarly difficult adjustments on all of these other snotlings. So I might do that, and then I have another one just so you can see a little before and after. This is the guy who I was just showing pulling the rope, and he was originally holding this little club with a nail. So that's my thought. The rope length that will be wound, again, will be exactly as much rope as would be needed on a 3-to-1 mechanical advantage to lift that platform from the ground to the top. Then I know the amount of rope wound on there is right, and it'll look right. Same for the rope that's being pulled off. So in order to keep these guys pulling the rope off from being like 18 inches away, I don't know what the exact length is going to be, but I can't have that happening. So the platform will be in some position partly raised, and then that position will be decided upon based on how best to manage the final distance that the guys pulling on the rope will need to be at. I want to have them attached to this box system, and I could have them separate in their own little box and then connect it, and I may, because at this point I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to connect the rope to the winch, but in a way that it can be detached for storage and transport. At this point I'm thinking I might have some kind of a connection on the bottom side, but again, it's not like I can just put a little magnet in there and just go like click, because the rope coming down from the pulley has to be under tension. The tension is the only thing that gives rope a chance of looking even plausible. So I have to give a little more thought about how that's all going to work, and that's the last sort of problem to solve for this entire arrangement. So yeah, so that's been a journey to get to this point and then get all these pieces done. So that gives you a look at the elevator system that I have created. It's probably the most challenging thing I've made in a long time, because it's fiddly, and I felt like an engineer. I'm like, well, I don't know, how's this rope going to go, and what is that enough of a mechanical advantage, and how much can a snotling pull? I don't know, but let's make sure they can pull it up. Anyway, tension and weights, and oh my gosh, it was an interesting journey, but I really like how it came out. I was a little hesitant at first with the scribe support beams, because man, they looked thin when I finally got them and put them up together, and I was looking at what the platform was going to be, and I was like, oh man, this is not going to work. And then add a little bit and modify things, and I think it looks a lot more believable now. So just shows that when you get into something and you're like, oh no, wait, sit back, take a day off, go to bed in the morning before you wake up. Ideas will come to you. That's when they come to me. So best to set something aside for the evening and then come back to it fresh. This is not about how to design things, though. I should wrap it up. Also wanted to mention, I don't know, Patreon, but I've been doing stuff on it. So, and a lot of it's stuff for, everybody. So you should go check it out. I did a monthly column very recently on making modular boards. This was about my practice and concepts for making the board. And I don't mean about the materials, well, a little bit of materials, but not the tools, right? How to get a square edge or any of that. No, that you have to figure that out on your own. It depends on what you're using. But why choose a certain size? How does that affect tiling, arrangements? What are some other considerations for that? Things to watch out for. So that's the style of that column. And then I'll be writing another one relatively soon on the actual, now that we've got them built, putting terrain on them. What are some things to think about for that, and how is that going to work together? So check out that recent column at the link that's, here. For that Patreon page. It's in the description as well. And of course, if you take a look at it and you think, that was pretty interesting, you could just pledge $1. $1 makes a huge difference to me. And if it took me 4 hours to write that column, you're only paying me 25 cents an hour. It's, that's an artist's pay. Certainly I've earned that. I'm in a weird mood tonight. I don't know, it's been a while since I've shot any videos, I think. Questions and comments down below, always welcome. And I don't think I have anything else to add. So hopefully you'll come back and see the next video, because you know that I will be back soon with another one of those videos for you to watch.